Hey, everybody. Got a question for you. If you're a man out there, are you experiencing it all where your partner is starting to set boundaries and you're having strong feelings around it? And you wonder to yourself, do I get to have boundaries? It feels like she's pushing me out and she's calling it important or healthy. And I don't know what to do with that. So I brought an expert along and I want to talk about that today. Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started. Laura, hi.
Hi.
I want to say thank you for being here today on this podcast and being willing. Are you a willing participant today? What is this experience like for you being here today? Just wanted to let group.
I am a willing participant. Yes. You did not coerce me in any way.
The reason this started is I invited Laura into one of my groups with the men, and we were talking about boundaries, and love the way she articulated it. The way that we're going to navigate this conversation today is, first of all, part one will be, Laura, I was hoping you would explain to us a little bit about what boundaries are and what women do to get healthy inside of the relationship where they've been betrayed. And then part two of that today will be, so do men get these? And I am doing that whole man woman thing, and I recognize the betrayed doesn't necessarily need to be a man. So forgive me for that. So, Laura, can you just give us a little bit for a man that doesn't know what these boundaries are and what you would share with women about boundaries?
Yes. So I'm happy to describe it the way that I describe it to clients and hold space for that. This is coming from the women's perspective of how I present it to them. When I was a little girl, I was outside playing in my backyard. I was probably like 4 or 5 years old. And the neighbors that lived behind us had a dog that they had just gotten from the pound. And I was out there playing, and the dog decided that I looked really fun to play with or to chew on. And he got loose from his chain and he came after me and attacked me. Okay. So my mom is inside and she sees it happening. She comes outside, she grabs me, chases the dog away, brings me to safety. There was lots of healing and doctor's appointments, all the things. So it was a while before I went back outside. But the next time I went back outside, my parents had fenced in their entire property. So the question that I always ask my clients is, why would they fence in their entire yard instead of just putting a cage around the dog that attacked me? Okay, so do you want to just have a conversation about that? Why
Yeah.
would they do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess to keep that dog from ever biting you again.
Yeah, it would have been a lot cheaper though, a lot faster. Put a cage around that dog.
Yeah, cool. Whose dog was it?
The neighbors behind us.
Could they put a cage around that dog?
No. They could ask the neighbor to put a cage around the dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have really any control over that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just pause there. Let's
Okay.
talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
It wasn't their dog,
Mm.
right? So they had no control over what the neighbors chose to do with their dog. It also, putting a cage around that dog would not have protected me from another stray dog or a person that meant me harm, right? So by fencing in what was important to them, their very most important possessions, their children, then they were able to keep me safe from any threat. So that's how I like to conceptualize boundaries. But we also start with what boundaries are not. So boundaries are not a threat, a manipulation, or punishment. And I think a lot of times in the beginning, we start with a list of things that are harming us. This really hurts me when you do this. And so we come up with this list of like, don't take your phone into the bathroom, or don't take your computer out of the main living area of the house, or I don't want you to have a web browser on your phone, whatever the thing is, right? We have a list These are the things that harm me and harm us in our relationship. So we come to our partner with a list of the don't do's, but that's just a cage, right?
So can I interrupt and ask a question?
Yeah.
Who's the dog and who's the little girl?
Okay, that's a good idea.
I'm just curious because I've heard this now for the second time. And now I just thought about this. I'm like, okay, who are people identifying as right now?
Yeah, yeah. So in my head, the way that I'm thinking about this, the dog is the behaviors that are harming me.
Hmm.
So the acting out behaviors, the integrity abuse behavior, those are the things that are harming me, harming our relationship. So that would be the dog. And then the little girl in this story is my core values and my rights within the relationship.
Oh my gosh. Okay, y'all. I want you to think about this, specifically the person that betrayed the other person. Who did you think you were? Who did you think was what? And Laura, I'm just fascinated that you said I didn't just identify that was a person. The bad guy, the dog, was the person betraying. You were actually labeling it as the behavior, like
Oh,
not the
absolutely.
individual.
Absolutely. Even just look at the requests that a lot of times we start out as thinking our boundaries. None of those have to do with the person. They're all an attempt to control a behavior that's harming me. So it's not the person that's the threat. It's the behaviors that are threatening the relationship.
What if I am the guy and I feel like I wish she thought that, and I don't think she thinks that. I think she thinks that I'm the dog.
Mm.
What would you say to him?
Even just hearing you say that, it makes me so sad that he would think that. And there must have been some conversations that have happened that would lead you to believe that about yourself. And I would say if a bear is chasing me in the woods, I'm running from the bear because I'm gonna die. And I'm not stopping to think the fact that the bear is programmed to hurt me and to eat me up is just how he's wired. I'm thinking I'm in so much danger, I'm not even gonna differentiate that.
Mhm.
And a woman who is very fresh in trauma, they're running from a bear. They're just trying to keep themselves safe, and they aren't maybe initially able to put words to those being separate.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're asking or requesting things around the behaviors that are harmful is an indicator to you, or can be an indicator to you, that she sees the difference. She feels the difference. She would have left the relationship if she thought you were the problem. She would have left it up front, but she's
Okay.
trying to manage behaviors.
I'm so excited about this. All right. So what I keep hearing you say is because this is the part she's trying to keep me out. She's trying to put me on the outside of the fence. She's trying to keep me out. What I hear you saying is no, it's the behaviors that aren't acceptable. It's
Mhm.
not that I'm not acceptable. And I think about that with his journey. So much of it is I felt like I am my behavior. I can't separate the difference between my behavior and my identity. And all is that paradigm shift that it can exist of she's not trying to keep me out, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
She's trying to keep the behavior from being a part of her world.
Yeah. And that's really, boundaries are there to protect the relationship. And when I am setting a boundary, I am trying to preserve the right of each person within the relationship to have a choice in how they show up or don't show up within a relationship. By requesting a boundary, by making a boundary, I'm fencing in the things that are important to me, my right to safety, my value of honesty and transparency, whatever the thing is that I'm fencing in with that boundary. And then I'm empowering my partner to now have the choice. He can choose to show up in that way, and he's inside the fence with me. And if he chooses not to show up in that way, that's important information for me to know too. I need to actually see how he uses his agency in this relationship as well.
Hmm. The question I have for you, Laura, is how is this fence helpful? Because it doesn't feel very helpful. Is it helping the relationship, not just her? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. And the whole point to a boundary, again, is to preserve the relationship. Because if it was just about her, she could leave the relationship and probably heal a lot faster and move on with her life. And there would be so much grief and mourning about what has been lost there. She's choosing to stay in the relationship, and she needs it to be safe for her. If she doesn't feel safe, she cannot heal. So a boundary within a relationship really is an opportunity for her partner to now show her he's safe.
Yeah, makes sense. So the next question I have for you on this is, how do women normally go about their boundaries and setting them up? And what's it like for them having boundaries?
The women that I meet with, this is a constant topic that comes up in our groups because it is one of those things that is terrifying. If I set a boundary, what if that damages the relationship? And they spend a lot of time really focused on how is he going to respond and what is he going to do and what if he chooses not to honor that boundary and then what will that mean that I have to do? And we can get really in a rabbit hole of all of that trauma mess that comes down. And where we start is let's start with what are your core values and what are your bill of rights within a relationship? Because unless you know what you're fencing in, you won't know how to fence it in. So, for example, one that I bring up as an example in group is I have the right to feel safe in my home. Okay. So there are behaviors that are happening in my home that make me feel unsafe. Maybe one of those behaviors might be he takes his phone into the bathroom. That's a really common one that gets brought up. Okay, so then we talk about this. Do we want to put a cage around don't take your phone into the bathroom? Even if he honors that, her brain will only say he did it because I asked him to, not because he's trying to be safe. So we really want to steer away from the cages and we want to say, okay, if you have the right to feel safe, how do you know when you're safe? What do you notice is what's in your environment? How do you feel in your body when you feel safe? And now we're going to fence that in. So then when you're having this conversation and you're setting a boundary, you might say something like, I have the right to feel safe in my home. And when you take your phone into the bathroom, for example, I don't feel safe. So when I don't feel safe, I know I'm going to have some distance from our relationship. That might mean I sleep in a different place, or maybe I'll take the kids and go stay at my parents' for a couple of days. And now he has full power to choose how can I show up safe in that relationship? Because I see that this is a safety issue for her. It's not her trying to control my behaviors.
Mm. What have you noticed about men and when they show up in helpful ways and hurtful ways around boundaries? What's the count knows?
How long do we have?
Yeah, it's only 3 more hours.
Okay. Okay. No, that should give us time. So I think the most helpful thing that somebody can do in boundaries is to try to see past the request and look at the need. Why is she requesting this? What is the need that's not being fulfilled? Is she not feeling safe? Does she not feel like she can trust me? And then let's behave to the need that she needs fulfilled right now. The best thing you can do is be consistent in showing up in a new way. Because if you're only showing up for 3 weeks to earn back something, that doesn't provide any safety. So we
Yeah.
really need that consistency over time.
Yeah, those are the 2 things I heard. The curiosity, not in as I have the right to question why she's doing what she's doing, but I wanna understand why it's important to her or why it's helpful. And when maybe I don't get a chance to ask her that. Maybe it's not even appropriate for me to go, "Why is your boundary what it is?" But understanding and trusting that she knows what she's doing, whether it makes sense for me or not. That I don't need to conceptualize, wrap my head around this one, but I do wanna understand why it matters to her. And then also, when I think about that, for me, in the journey, it's been every time my partner says, "I need some space so I can sort through things," it feels like rejection, and it feels like she's saying, "You're not enough, I can't be around you. I think I just need to realize I need enough space to realize that I shouldn't be with you." That's what it feels like on my bad days. And so what that causes me to do is in one moment, the good moments, feel supportive and feel like I can do that. And then the bad moments show up at her doorstep and say, "These don't make any sense to me." And I love what you're saying is about being really consistent and that trust of this is what she needs. And if I can wrap my head around that Laura, you're saying that this is for boundaries are so the relationship can exist, but then I can pull into the support part of that. And I guess I'm uncomfortable even saying that because if I'm relational, I just want my partner to feel safe no matter what, whether the relationship works out or not. If I really care about this person, I'm going to support them in their journey.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that you said because you said maybe he needs to just be curious about this and maybe he doesn't even get to ask her why does she needs this boundary. And something that can be so helpful and so connecting for a couple that is navigating this journey is for him to sit down with himself and a piece of paper and a pen and write at the top of that paper what is the need. And then do that work yourself. Like, why is she requesting this? What is it that this achieves for her? And then you have a conversation with her of, I can imagine that this boundary is providing this kind of safety in this way for you. Am I getting that right? And that can open up the doors to a very vulnerable and connecting conversation that alone provides some safety right there.
What do you notice that happens for the women you work with when he shows up that way and does that? What happens for them psychologically?
I think honestly, I don't know if it happens that often.
Fair.
When I meet with couples, I think it happens more often because they're both getting that same narrative of this is what would be helpful. I don't know how often this is brought up in men's groups and women's groups, so I don't know how often it happens. I would say that if you can do that, if you can speak to the need and you can say, I can imagine this is what's happening. Am I getting that right? That right there opens up the gate to the fence.
Mhm.
I don't feel like I have to have a big wall up anymore because I feel like your willingness to be curious about why I'm asking for this tells me that you're at least trying to be safe in the relationship. And it makes me want to lean in more.
Mhm. I'm just going to come back to something you said. So you don't think it really even happens that often?
Not as often as it should, for sure.
So just think about that. Like, I guess there's a part of me that whoever's listening to this goes, okay, Laura just said it doesn't happen very often. I would like to be somebody that does something that's not normal and leans into understanding why, leans into that. What would, this isn't fair at all. So maybe we can't even go here. What would you, if a guy says, okay, I'm going to go lean into that experience of understanding the why, should he go expectationless of what that should look like? How should he know if he's successful in that experience? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. That's why I think it's so hard is you really have to go in with zero expectations of an outcome. You have to let go of what the outcome's going to be of that effort. Because again, what's in our control bubble, men, is my effort. What's out of my control bubble is the outcome of that effort, right? And she may be activated. She may be so triggered. She may not feel safe in many areas of her life. And she's throwing out boundaries everywhere, just trying to get ground under her feet. And if you lean into that and it feels like it doesn't turn out well, and you're like, well, that didn't work. Let's not assume that didn't work. Don't make the circumstance the evidence, right? The
Mm.
circumstance was that she didn't respond well. That's not evidence that she in her brain is not feeling a tiny bit safer because you made the effort,
Don't
right?
make, don't make the circumstance the evidence.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that some more?
Yeah. I think we are just normal. Human nature is for us to say, if this is happening, this means this. So I went to my partner and I said, what do you need to feel safe? And she says, I need you to sleep in another room. And so then I sleep in another room. And then the next night I'm like, okay, do you feel safer? Can I sleep back in the bed? And she's like, no, I don't want you to. And we can very easily make that mean she's never going to trust me again. I never should have left the bedroom because now it's going to be impossible for me to get back in there. And that's just going to be the end of our relationship. She's never going to trust me again. We can very easily make that mean that because it means on the surface it looks that way, right? It totally does. But maybe let's consider that the circumstance is not the evidence. Okay. The circumstance is she's asked you to sleep somewhere else, and you honoring that without arguing and then not pressuring her to let you back in gives her that time and that space to breathe and to put ground under her feet and to figure out what is the thing I'm trying to fence in here and how do I fence that in? The evidence is a lot slower to come along. That consistency in what you're doing in your efforts is going to pay off in the long run if you're consistent with it.
Okay. Let me ask you a question I would be asking early on, which is, how do I know if I'm doing it right then? I know it's I'm just going to call it right now, codependent question, or excuse me, a dependent question. I need somebody to tell me if I'm doing it right, and it'd be really nice if it was her. But I'm hearing you say, Laura, I don't know. I'm not going to really know. Actually, I don't know what. I'm not going to pretend like I know what you're saying, but that's what would be going through my head.
Yeah. And that's the messy part of this recovery space is that it might feel like it works one time and then you try the same thing the next time and it doesn't work. And so then you're like, how do I even know if I'm doing this right? Because it feels like it's hit and miss whether it works or not. And I think the key there is going to be, where am I looking for my validation in my
Oh,
recovery efforts?
oh,
If you're looking in an outcome, she has to be showing up more trusting and more affectionate towards me. Then that's going to be a moving target because when
that's what.
she's triggered, she's reliving it. She's not remembering it. She's not trying to like beat you through the coals or drag you through the cold. She's literally re-experiencing that trauma. Were you
That
going to say something?
and just that's what I hear often. I'm not going to do black and white with this, all or nothing. But often it is that if men talk about it feeling like a moving target, and
Mhm.
I just want to highlight that it's a reason it feels like a moving target is because I don't feel successful unless I'm getting the attaboys and the kudos and that kind of stuff. And I'm
Hmm.
not connected to my values and still I'm connected to that validation. And yeah, and that I just want to see if we can, I wanted to tie that connection to what you were talking about there with the moving target.
Yeah. And I want to say what you were saying is that validation. He's wanting that validation. That's why group and therapy is so important in this space because she's not going to be able to be your cheerleader in this. It's going to be really hard for her to get to a place where she can be like, high five for not hurting me today, right? Because you
Yeah.
showed up in a normal, healthy way today. Great. She won't be able to do that. It'll take some time and healing on her part for her to be able to look over the history and see, wow, you've made a lot of progress. And thank you for the effort that you're putting into your own recovery. So if he can shift his recovery efforts more towards, I want to be this new person. I want to be safe. I am a safe person. Whether or not she recognizes me as safe is not my concern right now. And
Yeah.
I, even as I say that out of my mouth, I want to pause and just be like, you do want her safety to be your top concern, right? But her feeling safe is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to behave in a way that is safe. And then she will feel safe a lot sooner because if she feels like you're trying to earn her trust or earn some level of safety, then the way that's registered in her brain is now I have to anticipate every threat or every possibility where he might not be safe. And I have to be hyper attuned to every aspect of every part of his life and my life. And that's exhausting, and she won't ever feel completely safe. But when she can see that I am a safe person, whether or not she trusts me, whether or not she feels safe in this moment, I'm showing up safe, then she doesn't feel like anything that she does or doesn't do or notices or doesn't notice has any impact on whether he changes how he's behaving because he's just being safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say that again. And I'm worried about me coming across as mansplaining because you said something and I want to restate it. And I'm worried about mansplaining right now. Okay. So I want to share the way I heard it.
Yeah, go
All
for
right.
it.
All right. So this is so impactful to me because you have this experience where you just said, and I heard you stop dead in your tracks, Laura. You're like, wait, hold on. The safety part, like safety needs to be the priority. So it's my responsibility if I'm relational to have my behavior to create a safe environment for somebody else to be in it. That's my responsibility, but it's her responsibility or her work to create safety inside of herself, that if she chooses to be in that environment and the outcome of that is feeling safe. And often men get really frustrated, often, not all the time, get really frustrated because I created a safe environment for her and she's not feeling safe. She should feel safe. Yeah, that's not your responsibility to make her feel safe in that environment. It's a responsibility to create a safe environment so she can do whatever she's going to do to choose to be in that environment and decide whether she feels safe in that environment.
Yeah. And really her work there is recognizing in her body what it feels like to feel safe. A lot of times that's where the disconnect can be, because that being in my body is so painful, because last time I was really present in my body, the bomb went off and now I'm in so much pain, I just can't. So really that's her practice of being present in my body. What am I feeling? Where in my body am I feeling it? What do I need right now? What does safe feel like in my body? Because otherwise she won't be able to recognize it. But she for sure won't be able to recognize it if he's the moving target, if he's sometimes safe and sometimes not safe. That in and of itself, the inconsistency there is unsafe overall.
Mm.
Doesn't
Mm.
matter, show up safe for 5 weeks. If that 6th week, I'm not safe, I don't know if I can feel safe, right? And so then she will pull back more.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just highlight the fact of, y'all, like, guys, that doesn't mean you need to be perfect all the time in this environment. What it needs to be is you need to be emotionally grounded around your spouse and connected to your values. And if that's not a place where you can be, it's really important to not be there until you are. And a lot of times I want to be. So I'm just going to put myself in an environment and go, I am, and kind of just go, I am. Like, just trust me, I am. And she's going, no, he's not. That doesn't feel that way. That doesn't feel safe. No, it is. Because I so desperately want to. But if I can't be consistent, I'm going to cause a lot more damage because it's going to create a lot of chaos inside of our relationship.
Yeah. Okay, and what you just said of, I'm not telling you have to be perfect. Thank you for highlighting that, because I think that can become a really big roadblock in couples recovery, of him feeling like he has to be perfect, because we're sitting here saying consistency. You have to be consistent if you're not consistent. But when I'm talking about consistency, I'm talking about you absolutely can be honest 100% of the time. That is one thing that you can do. Okay. So maybe I have a slip. If I'm honest about that, that provides safety for my partner. So while there is some understanding that there's not going to be perfection in the behaviors, there can and should be an expectation of complete honesty and transparency, as close to day one as you can get. Because that's going to be the key going forward. Relationships that end because of this rarely end because of the acting out.
Okay.
More often it ends
Yeah.
because of the lack of honesty.
Okay. That's perfect. That's perfect. I love that so much. That is setting us up for part 2, which is she has her boundaries. And for a guy that's emotionally dysregulated and feeling like he's rejected, or like, when do I ever get a chance to have a voice? He does that thing where he says, can I have boundaries? When do I get to let her know? It's because he feels like he's been blocked out, like he's on the outside of the fence. He feels like he's the dog. Okay. So that's the emotional response to that. And it's the behavior that we're talking about. So let's talk about behavior, which is tried to create some different words with some different meanings. What that looks like is women have boundaries. Men, what they have is you do have right to create safety, which is what she's doing, but it's between you and the behavior itself. So I like to call those barriers, because what barriers are is they're things that keep me from my behavior, and it's a road that I follow. And on certain parts of the dangerous road, it keeps me from running off the road. And those barriers are very well defined because I love what you're saying there, Laura. You're like, I can be honest 100% of the time. And that is absolutely true if I've done the work to know what honesty is. And that means I've defined and I have barriers. I go, okay, this is a slip. This is a close call. This is safe behavior. And if I've done that work, I can provide that. And it scares me for the men, including myself back in the day, that haven't done that work, that I don't think they're being honest is really trying not to go to black and white with this. It's pretty hard for them to be honest in something that they're not clear about themselves.
Yeah.
And anyway, thoughts on that, Laura?
Yeah. Okay. So the way that you're talking about these barriers versus boundaries is making me think of just even a house, right? There's walls, there's doors, and there's windows,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what we're saying is, for example, right now, I am overrun with grasshoppers. They are everywhere. So if I open my front door, I know that there's probably 50 grasshoppers are going to get inside of my house. So I'm not using my front door right now. I'm using my garage man door so that if grasshoppers get in, they're getting in to the garage, not into my house. Okay. But that's the door. There's a possibility of something getting through. And so if you look at that from the perspective of a relationship, we're asking her to open a door to let you in. It's going to be a lot safer for her if she knows that you have a wall between you and the behaviors, where the behaviors are not getting in and they're not going to seep in if she opens up the door to let you into her fence.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to say it makes sense that he's probably sitting there saying, I'm not talking about boundaries with me. I'm talking about what if she yells at me? What if she says something really hurtful and that's a violation of my boundary? Absolutely, that is. And you have the right and the responsibility to keep yourself safe. And I would also just say that I can't convince a betrayed partner's body to show up differently when the way that she has learned to show up has been what has kept her alive in the threat of this addiction. So she has to feel safe first before I can convince her body to show up differently. She's not necessarily all in control of that fight or flight response. There's going to be some time there and some safety needs to be established before we can address that part of the relationship.
Two parts of this thing that I'm going to say next. So hang tight for the men that this is really upsetting for. Please bear with me. I don't experience a lot of men that are saying, I need boundaries too, because she's yelling at me, that have really defined their barriers, their behavior, that understand them correctly. The reason their wife is yelling is because he's very unclear on the behavior. She's yelling because she feels unsafe. It's because he doesn't know what's actually going on. He's so focused on her and not actually on what's creating safety for even himself. So it's funny. I, in my experience, don't spend a lot of time focusing on like, hey, yeah, you do need boundaries with your spouse yelling at you, because we're able to pretty quickly go, oh, that's the result of somebody that's scared. That's the result of somebody that doesn't feel safe. I think there's probably like 35 more podcasts in this stuff, Laura. So I just wanted to say thank you. Is there anything else on the boundary stuff that you wish maybe men could be aware of, or any other thoughts around them as they're working through their journey?
I think we've talked a lot about the most important things, but just to highlight, like in summary, I would just invite you to consider that these boundaries that your partner is setting is a desperate attempt for her to preserve a relationship, not to keep you out. She's just basically giving you a roadmap on what is safe for me and what is not safe for me. And if you can approach it that way, instead of feeling like it's an attack on you or your character, she wants to be your partner in fighting the behaviors. She doesn't want to view you as your behaviors. And I think if you can get in that mindset and start there with yourself, view yourself separate from the behaviors, it's going to be a lot easier to be safe within that relationship inside of that fence.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Or us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.